let's review another Foundry module, shall we? Ghostfire Gaming reached out to me and asked me to review their Dungeons of Drakkenheim Foundry VTT module, which I believe came out earlier this year, but I couldn't figure out when it came out. Yeah, that's right. We've moved up in the world, and this is a sponsored video. So yes, I received a free copy of this Foundry module in order to do the review. However, everything I'm about to say is going to be 100% me, 100% honesty. So let's just dive right in, shall we? Disclaimers, right? So one, I have watched Dungeon Dudes content before, but none of their live plays or actual plays. I've just watched a handful of videos on running games, etc. And I know that their actual plays are actually set in this world of Drakkenheim, where this city is. Surprise, I'm still living under this very cozy rock. Feel free to shame me in the comments. Another disclaimer, because I don't know anything about Dungeon Dudes campaign, I came into this with a pretty clean slate, so I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. Another disclaimer, I have tested this without any additional modules on, meaning I don't know how it works with MIDI QOL or whatever, but I did have version 3 D&D rule set on. So assuming that your modules work with the new update that released a couple weeks ago, they should work fine with this module. The only module I did have turned on was the Dice So Nice one, because they prompted me and they were like, this is recommended but not required. Would you like to turn it on? And I was like, hell yes. The Dice Goblin in me would probably try to destroy galaxies if I did not have my dice. Finally, I have not actually run a game in this, so everything could be very different once I actually start playing in this world, if I decide to do that. And I will be comparing this, obviously, to things I have used in the past, including the Phandelver one that I reviewed a couple weeks back, as well as the beginner box for Pathfinder / Abomination Vaults. I'll put those links in the description down below, and you can check those out. As always, I will try to put timestamps in there in the video so you can just click around. Editor KYLIE here with an important announcement. You can now become a member. Yay! I'm not going to go into all those details right here, right now, but I will have a video about it in the next couple days, and you can click the join button and it'll pop up all of the different things you get for being a member. So go check it out after this video, preferably. Anyway, back to the actual content you were here for. I'll put links relative to this video in the description, and I think that's it. So let's actually dive in. Woo! Let's talk about the adventure itself. I would totally run a game in this world. It's very interesting. I just love the overall feel of it. I can give a brief summary, but the summary will not do it any justice. It's essentially a large city that has fallen into ruin after a eldritch storm left a giant meteorite in the middle of the city, as well as destroyed most of the city. And now it's overrun with monstrosities, these magical crystals called delirium, and crazy haze, but also valuable treasure. So, well, the delirium is valuable too. We're talking a gothic Renaissance contaminated nightmare, and I'm all for it. There are a few very unique things to this world that I found very interesting. So there's the haze with its contamination and mutations mechanics. There are 5 different factions trying to take over the city, and there are all these custom monsters and spells and encounters. I think the coolest thing though about this adventure is that they left it pretty open-ended, right? So a lot of the time when you buy an adventure module, I feel like there's just set events. Yeah, maybe they'll have a little wiggle room here and there, but there's pretty much a timeline of events to progress the story. This one kind of has here's how you can start it, but you don't have to. And then here's how you could end it, but you don't have to. Then here's all this other stuff that could happen, but you can make it up as you go. And I think I like that the most. This is also why I homebrew a lot in my own games. It's because I feel like I'm getting railroaded by my adventure module. And so if I'm feeling that way, I don't want my players to feel railroaded. And I feel like this one does a good job of being like, well, here's the world. Here are some general things that can happen. And now have fun. The adventure itself runs from level 1 to 13, so it's a full-fledged adventure, which is great. And it can be played as such with kind of a faction-oriented adventure, a little bit of politics, a lot of exploration and dungeon diving. Or it could be played with kind of just this loosey-goosey, here are a whole bunch of exploration tasks, and they don't even really have to be fully connected. I feel like this, just in general, this adventure would be really easy to tailor to your group of players because I know every group is a little bit different. I, for one, always tried to tailor it to my players as well. So let's talk about them. The players, the monsters, and the NPCs. My favorite thing about this is that they have provided tokens for everything. All their NPCs, all their monsters, they all have this little purple ring that like makes them all connect and cohesive. But they also updated the SRD tokens that are related to the adventure with the same matching aesthetic, and it pleases my soul. I hate having my tokens all mismatched. I like having that cohesion because I don't want any little thing to pull my players out of what we're doing, you know? I like that they have kind of gone out of their way to make sure that these things match. And that to me also suggests that a lot of love was put into this module because that takes a lot of time. And it would just be easier to let the SRD ones just be dropped in their original token form. I think that speaks to the love and care they've put into this Foundry module. There are 5 unique backgrounds to this campaign, and I read through all of them, and I honestly, if I were a player, I don't know that I could decide because they were all interesting and all had their own twists. They each have their own roll tables. Unfortunately, the roll tables themselves don't seem to be linked to the actual roll table, but they do have a little button that you can click to roll the die, which I think is fine. And this is also before the version 3 rule set was updated. So I would be interested to see if they could update the module so that it could have a compendium where you drag and drop the background onto your player like Phandelver does. But again, this was probably made before that update, so it's not right to expect that of them, but it would be a nice addition because then it would be easy for players to just drag and drop it on there, and then it'll help tell them where certain feats come from or abilities come from. I think the best part of the character creation for this adventure is the personal quests. They give you a whole smattering of different personal quests that your players actually actively have to seek out, and they'll gain experience points or a level, however you're doing that. And I think having that motivation to explore and dive into the world and the story is great. I know this isn't like the first adventure module to ever have personal quests, but I just really love that this one does because it really does add to that exploration feel. Finally, on the monsters NPC note, this comes from someone who has dealt a lot with newbie players and in particular newbies to Foundry. I would love it if they had just one example player character in there to show off what their finished character sheet should look like in Foundry. That's just a request from me, not a thing that I feel like is necessary. Even I think Phandelver doesn't have anything like that. Abomination Vaults doesn't either. But I feel like since I deal a lot with newbie players, it's nice to have just an example that they can all look at and they can be like, oh, okay, so when they roll, it should kind of be similar to this. I do know though that most people just use D&D Beyond and then they import it in through D&D Beyond. And so it's not the end of the world to not have that, but it would just be nice to have everything all in one place and not have to have multiple tools and add that extra step of the DM having to go in and import your character when you need to. Let's talk about the journal entries. To me, this is the bread and butter of an adventure module, because as the DM, you will be staring at these things for hours. So 75% of your time is spent just in the journal entries. They have to be good, right? And historically, we know that I'm a hardcover book type of girl. If you didn't know that, if this is your first time encountering me, hi, that's the thing. I like to handwrite my notes. I like to have a physical copy of the book in front of me. When I run Abomination Vaults, that's what I have. I have the book on a stand over here, and I have my handwritten notes. Even a PDF isn't necessarily better for me. If I were running the game, I would definitely buy the book and the module. Take the following advice with that mindset in mind, because I do know that I'm very particular in this way. I do think that this did quite a few things well and could still do a couple other things a little better when it comes to journal entries. First of all, I have to say that the style and the artwork is chef's kiss, so beautiful. The layout designs are really nice. All of the artwork is beautiful and stuff that I would really want to show to my players. So I absolutely love those as well. And when I first opened up the whole module and it loaded, it really did hit me. I was like, wow, this is pretty. This is beautiful. I loved the initial feel of the entries. It was very stylized, set the tone. But then in typical me fashion, I got lost. At first, I thought it was because of the layout. Because looking at it, comparing it, the layout itself is okay. It's just there's not a lot to break up the text. Not a lot of skimmability to find what you're looking for. That initial thought was true to some extent, but then when I opened up the Foundry and Pathfinder journal entries for comparison, I realized it's kind of not 100% that. Now, obviously, the beginner box for Pathfinder and Foundry also outline certain things because they're teaching you how to play the games in general. This module, Dungeons of Drakkenheim, is not trying to teach you how to play D&D. It is assuming you know how to play D&D. So it doesn't outline the encounters like the beginner box does. And it also doesn't go into anything Foundry related, which does break up the text a lot in both the beginner box and the Foundry module. However, in Abomination Vaults, it also doesn't really go into that. It assumes that you've played an adventure before. So I was like, well, that's not it. Because looking through the Abomination Vaults, the layouts themselves are very plain, right? The difference is the hyperlinks. And that is where I think I got lost. Dungeons of Drakkenheim definitely does hyperlink things. So it hyperlinks spells, monsters, NPCs, and I thoroughly enjoyed that if you hover over it, a tooltip comes up. I don't know if that's just a version 3 rule set update, or if they had to do something special. Regardless, that's super nice because you don't have to click and go to that unless it's like an NPC with a stat block. But the thing they don't do is they don't hyperlink everything. In particular, they don't hyperlink any journal entries. And that means I have to do extra work to find those. And so I did find that a little bit of a hassle. And I think that was the main reason I got lost in the text, because I would look, I'd see, okay, this is in Appendix F or whatever, then I'd have to go to the journal entries section, scroll to find that appendix and open it up. Same with locations and places, I had to do that. They also don't make things like saving throws stand out. So in other modules, they often include a little button where it looks like a chat bubble, and you click it and it drops the saving throw into the chat, so your players can just click on it and they don't have to search their character sheet for the related role. I don't expect this out of Drakkenheim. However, the added bonus that I didn't realize I liked about this is that it makes the saving throw stand out. Most of the time in Drakkenheim, it's not even bold. So you have to really find it. And I think even just making it bold would add a little bit to that. The other thing is that in other modules, when things are hyperlinked, they also put a little icon in it to denote what it is. It's just a shortcut, a visual shortcut. And I think that we can take these visual shortcuts because we're in a digital realm right now, right? We're on Foundry where you don't have limitations on your text to fit on a page. You can go for as long as you want. So I think that I didn't realize was super helpful to me, but being able to skim through and be like, okay, I know there's an NPC here, and skim through and look for a little person icon that's highlighted in a little box really helps me. The other thing is that the hyperlinks they do have on here, they don't stand out much to me, and I think this is a me problem. Low key, I'm pretty sure I have a hard time differentiating between really dark blues, really dark purples, and black. And these are, I think, a dark purple. Because they're really dark purple, the underline helps, but doesn't really stand out against all of the rest of the text. My husband is also red-green color, and I think they call it color confusion, which is apparently a super common thing among males, not be able to tell the difference between red and green. It's just a genetic thing that happens to a lot of men. And so because of this, I'm hyper aware of what colors are used for things like links. And I think maybe changing the color, as stupid as that sounds, or even just highlighting it somehow like the other modules do, that would help me out a lot. And again, hyperlinking in between journals would also help. And then I think I wouldn't get lost as much. All that said, I do like how they included a whole section on session 0. One, it's just like a giant checklist that kind of goes through everything you need that is particular to this adventure, but also goes through just general things you might need at your table to go through. So I absolutely loved that section. I also loved, they have this little note where they put quoted text, from people within their world, and it moves a little bit. And I know it's like a stupid thing, and it's just like magical flair, but I love it. I'm all for it. I think I mentioned, but they do not go into how to use this module with Foundry, which I think is perfectly fine. Abomination Vaults doesn't really go into that either. The Phandelver module does, again, because it's tailored to beginner Foundry users and beginner D&D players, but it really just tells you things like, okay, now activate this scene, and it links the scene for you. And I think that would be helpful, but again, not really necessary. I also thoroughly enjoy that they put the journal entries on the map, so you can just click on them and see the information right there. So all of that is super helpful and pretty standard, I think, for most adventure modules, but I think they do a really good job. Overall, I just get lost in the digital journal realm. Talking about maps, let's talk about the maps. So, fun fact, all of these are made with Dungeon Draft, which is funny because I was looking at them and I was like, I feel like these feel very familiar to me. And then I went into the credits and it said maps made with Dungeon Draft. And I was like, oh, so if you didn't think Dungeon Draft was a tool that was worth your time, look at these maps and then tell me otherwise. Because these maps are gorgeous. I think the city map itself is not in Dungeon Draft, but you have to say that is also very beautiful. The map, like the city itself, is huge. You could have 1,000, you could homebrew 1,000 places in it and still probably only scratch the surface. It gives me very Paris vibes, I don't know, with that river through the middle, minus like the Ile de la Cité. Every map has, appropriate walls, doors, lighting, windows. That's kind of standard fare, but the map designs themselves are magical. They are so beautiful. They do really well with the different colors. I think the maps on this outdo anything I've seen on both Paizo and for like Phandelver's stuff so far. Who knows? There's time. Someone can change my mind. And it's not just because it's Dungeon Draft, although, I love Dungeon Draft. It's just everything feels so cohesive. Every map kind of gives the vibe of like a magical, infested, hazy world, and they did a really good job with it. So even if you don't buy it for anything else, just buying it for the maps alone, I think you're getting your money's worth. This is a side note. If you do end up buying this for the maps, I would personally add tiles on the map for teleporting. This is not something I think that they can do without creating, at least not now, because we're talking Foundry version 11. They could implement this with macros, but macros are hard, and I don't want to learn code to implement macros, so I really don't expect anybody else to try to implement it with macros either, because not everybody has the coding team for that. I think that's fine, but this is definitely something you could do with Monk's tiles if you're in version 11, and I think version 12, they're going to have built-in teleporting event tiles in version 12 of Foundry, so it's coming eventually anyway. So I would look forward to seeing what companies do with that too for adventure modules, because there are plenty of maps on here where they have multiple floors, and it'd be so much nicer if I didn't have to think about it and drag them to the right one. It just linked to it, but not expected for a module like this. But I do suggest looking into Monk's tile triggers if you buy this and setting those up yourself. The organization of the different scenes, at first I was like, what am I even looking at? Other modules I have typically been arranged by chapter, which works somewhat, but isn't like the most intuitive either. As I read through the adventure more, I realized that basing it on chapter wouldn't work at all for this kind of adventure, just because it is so open world. I actually ended up liking their organizational system better. I would still recommend doing a thing where you say like for the future and just stick everything in there and then pulling out only what you need and then archiving the scenes that you don't need anymore, because there are a lot of maps in here. I think it would also help if the scenes are hyperlinked in the journal entries to match, because they aren't hyperlinked either. That would help with my getting lost in the digital realm issue. As it stands, as it is right now, I would probably have a journal entry in Foundry for session prep where I literally just drag and drop things into that section, so I have all the links right there for that session. But I would probably set that up myself anyway, because of just how I prep for sessions. Of course, all the maps have all the enemies that are relevant or planned encounters already hidden on the map for you. Standard fare, but it's always good to point this out because eventually we're going to run into somebody who doesn't do this. That's really good. Overall, the best part of this entire module has to be these maps. So now let's talk about everything else. So there are roll tables. They're included. They're super nice. They are not hyperlinked. That's not necessarily bad, because I would just pull it up anyway. They do often give you a little button though to roll, and you can see the table right there. It'd be just like you were rolling in real life with a physical book. So that doesn't bother me. There are not any sounds or ambient noises that I know of because I was running through all of the different things, and then I realized I didn't have my headphones on, so I couldn't hear anything anyway. I did notice that the doors sound different, so depending on what kind of door it is, they have different sounds for that. So it wouldn't surprise me that I just missed some of the ambient sounds, but they didn't stand out to me either way. And I do know that some people just don't like that kind of stuff anyway. And finally, there are no macros. Again, don't blame them. Macros are complicated, but a lot of the modules that I own do have macros, so it's interesting that they didn't even try to do that. But again, it's hard. And I can only see, based on the adventure, I could only see macros being useful, again, for teleportation to different floors, especially within the same scene. Otherwise, I don't really see the need for any particular macros. Maybe I would see more reasons for macros if I were actually running the adventure. From my 2 or 3 hour run through of what was available here, I don't think they're necessary. Now let's talk about the price and who is this module for. So the price of this module, though I got it for free, is $39.99, which is typical for an adventure like this. I would pay that for what this is, especially because of the maps. Again, there are so many maps, and even if you don't use the journal entries or anything and you just need maps for Foundry, this is perfect. Everything's already built in, lighting, all of that. For the maps alone, with all the lighting, the walls, etc., $39.99 is perfectly like, that's like a steal at this point. I looked it up. They don't have a module with just the maps, which is fine. They do have a PDF version that is $9.99. That is just PDF versions of the maps, which is also something you could do. You could import it, but then you have to draw the walls, the lighting, and all of the doors and etc. Plus, they already have your tokens on there. Like, I don't know. It's just worth it for that in and of itself. I am one of those weirdos that wishes for bundles of a hardcover version and Foundry modules. I'm sure most people aren't like that. I feel like most people are like either all in the digital world or all in the like physical world, and I'm one of those people who has a foot in each door. This is not a suggestion aimed at Ghostfire Gaming or Dungeon Dudes. This is just a suggestion for the industry as a whole, I guess. I would love to be able to have my physical copy, my physical hard copy at my desk in my lap, but also have the maps and stuff running in a digital format. So I'd love a like deal, because essentially I'm paying for the content twice, and it sucks because you'd be paying $50 for the book and then $40 for the module, and that's definitely overkill. I also get it because it's like two different things and print is expensive. Overall, I think this is a great adventure. I think that it is tailored to people who already have experience running both a game in Foundry and a game in D&D. So keep that in mind. You want to have a few sessions under your belt before you tackle a beast such as this. I think that mostly because it is so open world, you need just a little bit more experience wrangling and managing your players in a setting like that. Not that you want to railroad them, but I just think having a little bit more experience will help make sure that the game doesn't get too far out of your control. This is definitely for at least an intermediate person. And then Foundry wise, like it doesn't give you any details on how to run it and with Foundry in mind. So I feel like you really have to have that kind of under your belt in order to run something like this. But there are plenty of tutorials for that online as well. So it's more about the fact that it's such an open world, which I love. I love that idea, and I love the challenge of it, I guess, because I would love to see what my players would do in a world like this. Super interesting. So overall, I think I would recommend this. What do you guys think? Has anybody here been more into Drakkenheim than me? Anybody else watch Dungeon Dudes more than me and know more about this world? Is this something that you were looking forward to? Apparently they have another Kickstarter coming up for something else. They have a bunch of other books as well. I'll link this module down below for you guys. You can take a look yourself if you would like. I don't get anything from it, but I'll share it with you. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.